Okay, the Senate Revenue Committee will please come to order. Judy, will you please call the roll? Excused.
Here. All right.
Excused. Here. Okay, the first item up for business is House Bill 103, Political Party Affiliation Declaration and Changes. Representative Haroldson, come on up. Explain this little bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come here today and present House Bill 103. So title line says Political Party Affiliation Declaration and Changes. This is crossover voting bill. It'd be talk about the elimination of crossover voting, and to kind of jump into the meat of it, if you get into page 2, line 20, declaration of changes in party affiliation. 22, for a primary election, an elector may declare or change party affiliation by completing an application signed before a notary official of elected official and filing it with the county clerk before the first day on which an application for nomination may be filed under Wyoming statute 225209. And what that says is that 225209 is just that 96-day window that falls into that May 13th through May 15th timetable. So this basically would make it where individuals who are looking at changing party affiliation would not be able to change party affiliation after that first day of sign up for elected officials. So in essence, those individuals going into that election cycle would be held into the party by which they came into that election cycle. And then further on, it talks about in the general election that it would be a 14-day window out of the general. And so this here would take care of the conversation that many of my constituents, and I believe probably all of our constituents have had, and that is we are seeing the Republican primary and the Republican election being watered down by those individuals that have chosen to remove themselves from the party they were with before that day and change over into vote on a Republican primary ticket. So it's a pretty simple bill. It's pretty straightforward. It just has that conversation piece of that middle of May date and that 14 days before general election date. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions? Seeing none. We've seen this bill a million times. I think we're pretty familiar with it. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Secretary of State Gray, you want to come on up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State, and then also we have Joe Rubino, our Chief Policy Director, General Counsel. Today, I ask that you vote in favor of House Bill 103, which will curb the process of crossover voting in Wyoming. As we have seen over the past several election cycles, crossover voting has undermined the sanctity of Wyoming's primary process by allowing voters to cross over into another party's primary election. Allowing people to change their party affiliation up to the day of the primary election and then change back dilutes our primary system. It creates incentives for people who do not share a party's values to nonetheless prevent voters of that party from electing a candidate that represents the party's platform by crossing over for as little as a day, an hour, or a few minutes, and then cross back. By contrast, ending crossover voting allows members of each party to pick a candidate that represents the voters of that party, disincentivizing these tactics and strengthening the party process and our election process. For this reason, I stand in full support of House Bill 103, which prevents electors from switching parties after the first day on which an application for nomination may be filed or 96 days before the primary election. This deadline, which is approximately 3 months before the primary, prevents voters from gaming the system by holding them to commit to a party before candidates formally declare, rather than allowing voters to wait and cross over. Republican and Democrat states alike have wrestled with this issue, and many states have banned crossover voting. And so I want to be clear on that, because one of the arguments that has been made, and I'm not sure if it's going to be made later, but I want to preemptively, sort of respond to an argument that has been made about constitutionality. New York requires a voter to commit to a party over 4 months before a primary election. Delaware has a 4-month deadline. Kentucky has a 5-month deadline. All have survived constitutional scrutiny. And so this constitutional argument that is often made by those opposing the bill is not borne out by the facts. The other argument that I want to make sure we respond to and preempt a little bit that we've heard in the last few committee meetings, that this would undermine our motor voter exemption at the federal level. And I want to be very clear on what our motor voter exemption states. Our motor voter exemption states that you need to have same-day registration, which this bill does not touch. It has nothing to do with prohibiting crossover voting during the primary period or on the date of the primary election. Motor voting is about same-day registration, which is not touched at all in this bill. So I want to be very clear on that, and our exemption's very clear, and I want to be clear on that argument that we do not agree with that argument. This bill also does what it closes this loophole on voter cancellation, which is very important, and it's just the people of Wyoming want a common sense solution to this problem, and this is the solution. So we are in favor of House Bill 103 and and stand in support for the bill. Thank you.
Any questions for Secretary Gray? Yeah, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Gray, good to see you here today.
Yeah.
Would you mind explaining, you went by that pretty fast on motor voting. Would you go through that one more time just so I can get those thoughts straight in my head?
Yeah.
Thank
Secretary
you.
Gray.
Well, we've heard the statement from a couple organizations opposing the bill, saying that this would somehow undermine our exemption with the Federal Motor Voter Act. So we're exempt from those registration requirements because we have same-day registration. But that exemption does not touch at all the crossover issue. And so, I don't know what's going to be said, but since agencies usually go first, it's sometimes better to preempt statements that we view as inaccurate beforehand. And I want to be very clear that it's an inaccurate statement, that this would threaten our exemption. And we've talked to the clerks about this as well. I know they're coming, and they've been in agreement with us on this issue, and the exemption is very clear. So, thank you.
Secretary Gray, on the states like New York, Delaware, Kentucky that have a much longer lockout period than Wyoming is proposing here.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about those states and how they do it? Are they exactly similar to Wyoming but just a longer lockout period?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding on that is it is just a longer period. And so from a constitutional perspective, a longer period would be more limiting. And so if we have a shorter period than other states that have survived constitutional scrutiny, by logic, we should survive constitutional scrutiny. And I think that's pretty clear. Mr. Rubino, do you have anything you want to add on the nature of their lockout periods? But I think it's a very similar lockout period.
Mr. Rubino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The National Conference of State Legislatures, which we're all familiar with, has looked at this, and that's what they've surveyed. And those were just a few of the examples that that we identified, which is, there's a broad range that some states have. Some states have completely closed primaries. Some are, partially closed, partially open to unaffiliated voters, open, So what we isolated our research to was the period that is required to affiliate. Those are in similar states that run similar elections. So those are the where you have to affiliate to vote in a primary election. They don't have a caucus system or anything like that. They're opening it up to electors, but you have to be part of that partisan primary process. And so that was where our research went, and that's why it went to those states in particular, because they identified, in that process where you have to identify.
And Mr. Chairman, can I add one thing? I
Yes,
mean,
Secretary
one of the
Wright.
things we wanted to clear up is this inaccurate argument that's been brought in the past about constitutionality and states that have survived scrutiny that have much longer periods. So,
Thank you. Any more questions for the Secretary of State's office? Thank you, gentlemen. Any other agencies wish to testify? Any other legislators in the room that want to testify? Any other legislators? County clerks? Welcome. Ms. Langford?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senators. My name is Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the county clerks of the state of Wyoming. My purpose today here is to focus on the administration of Wyoming elections, and particularly change in party affiliation. The clerks have had the opportunity to review the proposed legislation several times and would be able to administer it. We have a couple of concerns we'd just like to bring to your attention. One being that we're concerned about voter education, as this will be a major change as far as declaring their party early. And if there's any confusion that goes along with that, because they'll need to be changed in May to be able to vote in an August election. Disenfranchised voters in Wyoming, 11% of our voters in Wyoming are either independent or unaffiliated voters today. That's about 33,000 people. They would not be able to declare a party and vote on election day. So just to keep that in mind. And with that, Mr. Chairman, the County Clerks Association has no position on this bill. We're able to administer it, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Langford. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am.
Yep, you're welcome.
We'll open it up to general public comment. Come on up, we'll just take it one at a time.
Thank
Please
you.
introduce yourself to the committee.
Sherry Davis from Crook County, Sundance. I really appreciate you senators resurrecting this bill that, yes, we all know, because for years and years and years, we fought to get this bill forward. It's not much different than the Hatfield and the McCoys. I don't think the McCoys would appreciate the Hatfields coming and choosing who was going to represent them. And we've certainly had that for quite some time. I appreciate the clerk's number of 33,000. On this Secretary of State report of 2018, it shows affiliated party change of 12,500 in that primary election. We know that primary was lost, conservative candidates, multiple ones of them. The vote was led by 9,000. So that crossover affected who our governor was. So this isn't to criticize our governor at any level. This is to say that it is having an impact. So I brought a robocall I have that I'd like to share with you that was on my phone. And there was a Democrat who gathered between $100,000 and $150,000 to support this call. So I have.
Attention Democrat and independent registered voters. Tomorrow, Wyoming risks electing pro-Trump conservative Foster Fried as governor, but you can help stop it. Switch Wyoming has been reminding Democrat and independents like you that you can influence the election and help stop Fried by voting for a moderate, reasonable candidate like Mark Gordon, who won't be beholden to Trump. Tomorrow, just go to your normal polling location, ask to switch parties, and vote in the Republican primary. They have to let you do it on the spot. That's the law. Besides, you can switch back later. Remember, if we don't elect a moderate, reasonable candidate like Mark Gordon, Democrats and independent voices will be ignored. Let's send President Trump a message. Wyoming is not Trump country by beating Foster Fried and electing Mark Gordon. 307-213-9372. This message is an in-kind contribution to Switch Wyoming.
So
Attention Democrats.
oops. Thank you. I do want to be clear. This has nothing to do with Mark Gordon. It has to do with the process that says you can impact and bring moderate representation to what we know is a conservative state. And people move here because we're a conservative state. The New York Times posted an article that said, Wyoming has moderate representation because they allow crossover through the day of the primary. So I know if New York knows that, our legislators can do something about it. So we're trusting you. We're trusting you for the deadline. We certainly need that space to prevent people from crossing over once they see who's running in what election. It's about intentionality. And so the intention's been clear for some time and it's been effective. So I am asking you and thanking you, thank you for bringing this legislation forward. And I trust you'll hold it to be true on the floor.
Wait, hold on, Ms. Davis.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Any questions from Ms. Davis? I'll just say thank you for sharing that. I found that very disturbing too when I received that robocall, and those people had no intention of ever being an actual Republican. They were doing it to game the system because we allow it to happen within our statutes, and that's the genesis for this bill. So thank you. Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Who's next? Ms. Lowe.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and esteemed committee members. My name is Jen Lowe. I am the Executive Director at the Equality State Policy Center. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit that advocates for fair elections and transparent government. I'd like to start with saying that Wyoming's elections are safe and secure, and that is attributed to the 94% of voters that felt their vote would be counted accurately in the 2022 election. I would also like to point out that there have been no challenges to the integrity of our election system, and that is thanks to the hard work of our county clerks and our Secretary of State's office. ESPC stands in opposition to House Bill 103. Crossover voting, also known as party hopping, which I think is a great name, in other countries can happen for several reasons, not all nefarious. ESPC represents the voters. We advocate for access to the ballot and full expression of one's franchise. We believe that as taxpayers, voters are paying for elections and should have the rights to fully participate in them. By preventing people from canceling their registration during the period referenced in the bill, I am concerned that you may be challenging their freedom of speech and right to associate. By preventing voters from aligning with a primary ballot before knowing who is even running, you are limiting their ability to fully express their franchise. I want to be very clear. By changing current law to prohibit voters from changing their party affiliation before knowing which candidates are running, you are taking away a right, a freedom that Wyoming voters have right now. We've already heard that the crossover bill is not likely in violation of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, but we have not seen a legal opinion that confirms that. And if the state loses its motor voter exemption, it will be very expensive to the state and to its agencies. States like New York do not have an exemption to the Motor Voter Act. It's also worth noting that during the floor debate, it was mentioned that there is currently a citizen-led ballot initiative to end crossover voting. As you are well aware, in Wyoming statute, the initiative process would require that you would have the opportunity to review this bill and create legislation before it was put on a ballot and put to the voters. So even if this does not pass, and the ballot initiative does, you'll have another opportunity to create legislation. Keep in mind that most of the folks that crossed over during the 2022 primary did not cross back. And even with all of the crossover voting that occurred in 2022, the primary candidate that won did so with 37 points. That concludes my comments, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Any questions? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask you if you agree with this statement. The purpose of a primary election is for a party to select a candidate. It's not a general election. It's not if you want to come over and you disagree with that party, you want to come affect who they choose as a candidate. This isn't an election necessarily. It's a primary aimed at one party or another party selecting somebody to run to represent that party. Would you agree with that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lowe?
Mr. Chairman and Senator McEwen, I believe that a primary election was created at the turn of the 20th century to give more power to voters, that voters wanted to take the power out of dark, smoke-filled rooms and have an opportunity to voice who they would like to see as candidates. I do not believe that elections are created to protect any partisan party. Rather, I think elections are created to allow voters the opportunity to voice their franchise.
Okay. Any more? I'll follow up on that and ask you, Ms. Lowe, if this keeps getting defeated, this bill, what you will probably end up seeing is the Republican Party pulling out of the whole primary process and going to a caucus back to the cigar-filled room that you just mentioned. Is that an unintended consequence that you want? Because I don't see any other way. Either you fix the primary process or you get rid of it. And I think the Republican Party's to the point where they want to just go ahead and pull out of it. What do you say to that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I do think caucus is probably a way to keep that decision closed and in a more private circle. But as long as partisan parties are called out in Title 22, I'm not quite sure that that is an option.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for your time and for your service.
Thank you. Who's next?
Thank you, Chairman Beitman Committee. I'm Marguerite Herman. I'm here for the League of Women Voters. And to be frank, this is the fourth time I've testified, and I'll try to not repeat a bunch of my previous testimony against this bill. But I do start out by saying the League does oppose this bill. We have a little saying that says, be informed and vote. And to that end, the League does a lot of local forums, candidate questionnaires with the purpose of informing voters. And I would say the result of this bill would be, don't bother, because information is not going to serve you in the primary. You've made your choice. I would say there are 4 false premises for this bill. Number 1, that voters don't care about individual qualifications and differences in choosing who will represent them and run their government, that all they care about is signing on to a party platform. I think that is incorrect. You probably disagree with me, but that's the League position. The second one is all candidates will follow exactly the positions as written by their party leaders. And just to say that I've been following the legislative process here in Wyoming for 40 plus years. And one thing that I've learned is that legislators and all candidates they have a letter after their name, they have a lot of diversity of positions that they take on issues, a result of their own life experience and their philosophies and all that. They do not walk in lockstep with the party platform necessarily. Some do, some don't. That they're to say that you belong to a party, therefore I can tell exactly what you're going to say about every issue. That has not been my experience. That another false premise, that crossover voting determines primary results. I don't know if Gail Simmons is going to run through her data deck, but the indication is that, in fact, that is not true. That they have not changed outcomes in primaries. Whatever the robocall intent, I have no comment on that, but I'll just say whatever wishful thinking is there, it has not panned out. Also, that restricting registrations does anything to enhance security, fairness, and openness of our election. It really doesn't do that, address that. And the fourth one is that political parties' desire to strengthen party discipline in a primary is understandable, but it does not create an obligation by the state to put it in statutes and to conduct public and pay for public elections to achieve that. And just to sort of address what the question from Senator McEwen is that I think what you're describing is a caucus, and certainly the party can do that and then control who participates in it and do all the outlines and that sort of thing. I would think the openness to voters is a better process, but certainly that is the prerogative of the party to decide how how they want to run that. I know two things, just to conclude. The voters do want to start their sorting of candidates during the primary, and do not want to wait until many of the choices have already been decided in the general election. They are diligent, conscientious citizens who take the exercise of an informed vote very seriously. I don't think it's by whim or anything. The citizens in this state, I think, take, it was just mentioned that the term, the full expression of their franchise. They take it very seriously. It's not just a right, it's a responsibility. Second, the current system of letting people change their partisan affiliation during the primary season, excuse me, is the best vote of confidence that we can have in the citizens of this state to know what they are doing and what they want in their elected officials. As a matter of fact, I did a little informal survey of some of the students here sitting in the room, civic students from Riverton, 18-year-olds, they will be voting in the next election. And I think they would very much appreciate the full expression of their franchise as they head into their very first election. And that is where the League of Women Voters stands. We stand with the voters, and we stand against House Bill 103. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herman. Any questions for Ms. Herman? No, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, welcome to Revenue.
I'm Pete Illoway. I served 14 years in the House of Representatives. I was chairman of Corporations Committee for a number of years, so I do understand about elections and so forth. So I just wanted to let you know that I don't feel this is a good bill. It went through the process, and that's fine. And then when it was dead, then it was brought back. I understand very well about rules and so forth in the Senate and the House. That was allowed. I was surprised that it did. I was surprised that it got as far as it has. But I haven't figured out yet why crossover voting is so bad. I haven't figured out why the Secretary of State is so enamored with it that I always thought the Secretary of State was to make sure that voting and the elections were safe and secure, and he didn't come out and lobby for a particular area, which really we've had crossover voting for. I've only been in this state since 1963, so we've had minor crossover voting back and forth. It has not affected elections. It affected one election. It was noted this time with Congressperson Harriet and so forth. It's just, as far as I'm concerned, where he's going is just not right. Elections are safe and secure in Wyoming. I don't think that in my time in the state of Wyoming that we've ever heard of anything that is not safe and secure, and that's thanks to people in the Secretary of State's office. And people in Wyoming, it's the citizens that vote. And the citizens are pretty well satisfied. I haven't heard any big problems with it until the last election. So I think to change a long accepted process in the state of Wyoming is wrong, and to try and do it. Citizens are going to do what they want to do. And I think if you are bound and determined to change this the way we vote, then at least change the time frame. Telling me that I can only change my affiliation up until the time is before people file. When I ran the first time, one person I filed way before the time, and one person filed against me 1 minute before 5 o'clock. Now, if I'd had to change my affiliation back, couldn't have done anything. I'm sure you also have the same problem. The people that want to vote want to know who they're voting for. It's not after the fact. So I think at least take a look. If you're bound and determined, and I think this committee, I already figured out that it probably comes out of here at least 4-1. It'll probably come out of the Senate if it gets through. At least allow the citizens to make a choice with who they're going to vote for in the primary. That's all that I think at least some people would like to see. If you're bound and determined to change how we do it and get rid of crossover voting, fine. Then move the time frame that I have to change my affiliation after people have already filed. That way we at least know who we're going to vote for. So that's enough said. And so.
Thank you, Mr. Illaway. Looks like Senator Ide has a question for you.
Senator, good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Illaway, would you, just a question, maybe to answer, would you agree that the majority party in Wyoming, which is the Republican Party, where most of the voters are, would you agree that the majority of those Republicans like this legislation? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Illaway.
Well, there's about, Mr. Chairman, there's about 350,000 people that vote, have no idea. I would guess that if they get disenfranchised, you will find out that they're not in favor of it. And I suspect the way this bill is written disenfranchises people.
Mr. Illaway, you mentioned moving the time frame up so people would know who's running. But then we've also heard, and we've, in the past election cycles, how that information is used to target specific candidates. So if you move that back, so that robocall you just heard would still be in play because you'd have the ability to find out who's running. And then in that particular case, it was to find the more moderate, maybe left of center candidate that the Democrats could urge their supporters to switch over and support that candidate, which disenfranchises Republicans. So that doesn't solve that problem. What would your response be to that?
Have an open primary and get rid of this whole mess.
Okay. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's a state out there next to an ocean, and they do a lot of interesting things. One of the things they do is a jungle primary. And I think what I'm hearing from you is you would support that kind of legislation. We'll just do a jungle primary and the top two come out and then they run against each other. Am I hearing you right? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Illaway.
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, have no idea what that state is or a jungle primary or whatever, but what I'm trying to say with this particular piece of legislation, we have worked, we've voted in this state for years and years and years, and really have had no problems until the state party, which is an abomination, start getting involved in saying, gee whiz, too many Democrats are coming over to be Republicans or to vote as Republican and so forth. We don't have a problem. We have a problem with the party.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate your testimony. Anybody else? Yes, come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Mark Moody, just an average American voter, resident here in Laramie County, and a Republican committeeman for Precinct 37. I and my constituents in the precinct support this bill 100% as presented by the great representative from Platte County with no amendments, clean bill to get on third reading and onto the governor's desk. We know crossover voting is a problem here in Wyoming. You look at the 2022 primary elections. I can say from canvassing for various candidates during the primary election season, supermajority, nearly 90% of those supporting Congresswoman Hageman's main opponent were not on the list of registered Republicans. Okay, I don't know if they were Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, but they were not on the list. Crossover voting is a problem. And even Congresswoman Hageman's main opponent said, oh, register as if you're a Democrat, register as a Republican to vote in the primary. So we saw that even made national news. And I'll end on this. The largest impact on crossover voting, the primary elections that are overlooked are our party precinct seats. Those are decided during the primary election. We don't have a general for our precinct seats. And we had non-Republicans voting in our precinct seats. In Laramie County, some people lost their seats that were in there for years by 2 votes, 3 votes. There's definitely there we can say there probably was some crossover voting going on. So urgent I vote, clean bill. Please get this on 3rd reading. Please get this to the governor to sign it and make it law here in Wyoming. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Any questions for Mr. Moody? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further testimony? Nope. Welcome.
Hi, Chair. My name is Chelsea Collier. I'm from Campbell County. It's my first time testifying here.
Welcome.
So thank you. I am here today to speak in favor of this bill. I'm also a precinct committee woman. If crossover voting is not an issue, as stated by a previous speaker, then why has this legislation been so important for so many terms? The focus of a primary is for a party to just select someone who represents them. I have not been represented by the people who continue to infiltrate the Republican Party. Please allow us the opportunity to choose who represents us. I ask you to vote in favor of this bill unaltered, please.
Thank you, Ms. Collier. Any questions for Ms. Collier? Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons.
Gail Simmons, Civics 307. I'm a nonpartisan blogger on the legislature, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to disappoint Marguerite, but I'm not going through all that data. I have been analyzing data from the Secretary of State's office on voters and registration for the last 8 years. Rather than bring these up, I've actually posted the last results, the ones that I have provided in the 3 other committee meetings on this, up on civics307.com under file share. So people can take a look at that themselves. I am not going to urge you to vote this down. I think it's a foregone conclusion. But I do want to point out some things that you might want to consider. The first is that the hypothesis that crossover impacts results is not supported either by data or by logic. And I say that having done this for so many years. So for example, on logic, there are 20,000 crossover votes. Former Congresswoman only got 43,000. Does anybody honestly think that the 20,000 voted for our current Congresswoman? In addition, if this was really an impact, would we actually have 23 to 25 members of the Freedom Caucus in our current legislature? So I don't think it is impacting. There's also some numbers that are around there. And again, you can take a look at that, but there's some key takeaways that I think that we need to consider. And by the way, even though I'm nonpartisan blogger, I am a registered Republican since 1974, registered in voting. So the first key takeaway, as always, is be careful what you ask for. The data shows that when people cross over and they stay. So the dilution that you're talking about, and I have a friend who talks about the fact that the solution to pollution is dilution. So having more people who are already registered as Republicans vote actually would dilute that. By moving this up so far forward, I I believe that what's actually going to happen is people who want to vote will simply cross over earlier. And you can make it a year in advance, or you can make it a day in advance. The data shows that they change over and they stay. There's a message in here to the 60,000 registered Republicans who do not vote in the primary. So 3 times the number of registered Republicans did not vote in the primary in 2022 than there were actual crossover. And that message is that the crossover vote, the people that we don't want to vote, is more important than theirs are. Because I'm not seeing any broad effort to get those 60,000 to actually show up and vote in the primary. We're sending a message that party is more important than person. I think it's probably both, but I also think that there is not a homogeneous Republican voter base out there. We coalesce around the what's the word I'm looking for? The platform. But the other piece here is a very true character of Wyoming, which is kind of an adult version of, you're not the boss of me. And I think that we need to make sure that we're taking that into consideration. On the information on the Laramie County, just one of the facts that I have is that only 35% of those precinct positions in this county were competitive. 25% nobody even filed for. And when you look at the participation, 50% undervotes for precinct. I think that we need to be concentrating on how do we engage people who are not engaged than we are trying to deal with people who are engaged that we don't want to. And Mr. Chair, just to address the question about pulling out of the primary and the jungle primary, I would like to point out that a primary election is only a partisan election if the legislature says so. So in Title 22, under the major party versus minor party, in our state, that title is what says our particular one is a partisan. So the question about going to caucus, I don't think that puts it back into the dark rooms. I think that there are some real benefits to the people of the state and to the Republican Party by having it go to caucus and identify, first of all, you can lock down absolutely who comes in. Since 1974, I have not been able to vote in a primary for a Republican president. And if this was a caucus, I actually could. So I'm not going to say don't vote for this. I think it's a foregone conclusion, but I do think that there's going to be some considerations that need to be made about improving and increasing the reach. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Questions? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am. Who's next? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Pearson. I'm a Riverton High School government teacher, also the debate coach there. And I'm very happy to be here with several of our students. Hopefully they've woken up a little bit for a moment, but I wanted to tell you that one of the things that we love to teach our kids is how the election process, and how I love to teach them that they get to research beforehand and that they have a chance to decide who they elect and that who they elect works for them. We have had several senators and legislators and mayors and mayoral candidates in my classroom, and our kids actually hold these legislator debates there, okay? And I want you to know that I am registered Republican, but I am actually a moderate. And I love the fact that I feel like that I can pick who I want to vote for. And that I tell my kids, I say, you have the freedom to choose, that you get to decide that by looking at the candidate and deciding on what their platform is. And we actually will do that when it's election years. We'll actually go to their website, we'll call people, we'll talk to them. And we'll even hold these like fake elections in class and everything. It's a beautiful thing, the American process. And I just need you to know that it was a little offensive when I heard that this moderate and this seeping into the party. Where is my place? Where is my party? It's certainly, I don't feel like it's with the Democratic Party. If I'm registered Republican, where is my place? So I feel like I get to pick, and I feel like I need to do that whenever whoever decides to run. I don't want to pick that several months before. And I feel like my students get to have that opportunity as well. The problem, one of the issues I had in this bill was the notary part. Was that a thing before where we had to have, you're switching over to be notarized? I didn't think it was. And so when I heard that it had to be, you have to have it notarized, I thought, this is one more step and one more loophole or one more problem that could create a lot more issues for people that do want to, if they see some candidate that is in the Libertarian Party. We've had a few of those in Riverton, and that want to switch over and maybe vote for her or something. How are they going to do that last minute? So I just feel that my kids deserve that right, and that I deserve the right to teach them the way that ought to be, and that it shouldn't be a few months before, and that they have to go to notarized. I feel like that we live in a beautiful state of equality, and that Wyoming is that way. One of the reasons I live here is because we give a freedom to our people that not many other states do. We really, really do. And I love that about us, that I feel like I can carry a gun, that I can speak my part, that I can come here and have my students participate in this opportunity that they don't have in a lot of other states. And I'm grateful for that. And I hope that we can keep the freedom that we've had for many years and continue that. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Any questions for Ms. Pearson? Yes, Senator McEwen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question based on what you said. So you're a registered Republican,
Yes, sir.
and then we go to the general election.
Yes, sir.
Do you have to vote for the Republican then, or can you vote for the wonderful Libertarian that you're really supporting in the general election?
Well, I didn't support
Ms.
her,
Pearson,
but
Through the chair, please.
what?
Through the chair, please. Not
Oh,
directly
sorry.
to the-
Yeah, I actually didn't support her, but I don't know the answer to that. I think that you'd support your party. Yeah. And that's what I would, but I'm saying that I guess let people support who they want to support. That's what I'm saying.
To answer your question on the notary, it is an existing language.
It is
currently,
before?
and
Okay.
This mirrors the existing language. in
Thank you.
paragraph B.
I wasn't sure on that, so thank you. Mhm.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any more public comment? How many other people wish to testify? Raise your hand so we can kind of get a gauge here, because we're going to be done at 2 o'clock. We have 1, 2, okay. We have 2 people online, so 4 total. Okay, and I would encourage you to please, if something hasn't been said, please make that point, but let's not repeat the previous people's testimony. So with that, please introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Kathy Russell, I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Republican Party. And so what I will share is what has been discussed in the Wyoming Republican Party. Number one, the primary being on the ballot is specifically to allow the political parties to select their candidates. And so crossovers, despite the anecdotal evidence or anecdotes given here today, does affect those and has for quite some time. This piece of legislation has been a priority for the party for well over a decade. And specifically for the reason that it affects not just the the statewide elections, but also the down ballot. And we have plenty of evidence. As the executive director, I hear a lot of the evidence that comes from the county chairman about ways that their parties are affected. As a county chairman myself, I found that there were people running who knew nothing about the party, came in at the last minute, and that's been a not an uncommon experience. The people who are disenfranchised, according to our people, and this is coming through the state party, through the county parties, and so this is hundreds of people in the GOP feel that they're being disenfranchised with the way the system is right now, because they can do everything they can to try to promote candidates who support the platform, and I'll say a little more about that in a minute. But if somebody comes in and is voting strictly on a person, that goes out the window. And so the people that we're trying to promote, and that's the whole purpose of a political party, is to promote ideals and have candidates promoted who promote and uphold those ideals. That's the whole purpose of a political party. So that our GOP people are feeling disenfranchised by the way things are right now. Closed primaries are very attractive. It allows you to do that very thing that you're here for. The next thing is I have a lot of requests for a candidate. It's called an election notebook in some states. It's a candidate notebook. I can't think of the term for it right now. In other states, the party is allowed to put out the different qualifications and experiences of candidates. We're not allowed to do that here. We cannot speak during the primary about the candidates as a party. And so people are always surprised that we don't have that here. So one of the reasons why we rely so heavily on the platform is that's the first vetting of a candidate. Here's what we believe. Do you support that? That's the very first vetting. And so when a person comes in, they may have a favorite person who doesn't care anything about that first vetting point. So we're very much in favor of this bill. We feel like it addresses all the issues that have been raised before, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Any questions? Any questions? Thank you. Hello. Come on up, introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Nina Weber. I am a registered Republican in Park County, and I am also the Wyoming National Committee woman. In the 2022 primary, there were approximately 13,014 Democrats that switched to vote in the Republican primary. There were 8,059 others that switched to Republican to vote in the Republican primary. So about 21,073 people switched to vote in our Republican Party. Why did they do this? To affect the outcome of our Republican primary. This bill passed out of the House of Representatives by 51 Republicans and 62 members. Why? Because they listened to their constituents. The Republican Party platform is what defines Wyoming Republicans. This platform is what being a Republican is all about. This platform is voted on every 2 years. The process starts at the county level, and every Republican has an opportunity to have a voice in the direction, beliefs, and values of our party. Then at the state convention, these values are discussed and voted on by all 23 counties. Since 2016, our Wyoming GOP platform has stood basically untouched. For generational Wyomingites, there is a sense of pride in how conservative Wyoming has been. As we all have seen an influx of people moving in from other states, we need to protect our conservative values by passing the bill that bans crossover voting into law. In every battle, there are pawns, sergeants, generals. Our Wyoming legislators are the five-star generals that can protect our conservative Republican values. I urge you to vote yes on this bill as written. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee people. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Senator Ide does. Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. National Committee woman, thank you for being here. And to the previous speaker, thank you. I just want to say thank you for the good work that you're doing nationally as your position and the executive director of the Wyoming Republican Party. Good for you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Weber.
Thank you.
Okay, does that take care of the in-person testimony? Anybody else wish to testify? Seeing none. Judy, who's on Zoom? Okay, go ahead. We'll take whichever one you put up first, Judy. Mr. Barron, please introduce yourself to the committee.
Let me turn the light on so you can see me. Sorry. My name is Joseph Barron. I'm the Crook County attorney, and I speak to the committee about the bill, and I just speak to it as an experienced candidate and elected official. I am a Democrat in Crook County. I've been elected 9 times in Crook County, and I've only had one contested race as a Democrat, and that was back in 1990 in my first term of office. Since that time, I've had some write-in opposition, things like that, but I've run for office in all those times and have carried a majority of the folks that have voted in that election. What my purpose in speaking to you today is this. It's just to give you my experience on this and what I have seen over this time. And in Crook County, we're the reddest county in the reddest state. That's a fact. And so, but what has occurred over that time period is that there's not been another contested Democratic primary since that time. And what has happened then is any kind of a contested race that has occurred in our county from local officials, statewide officials, those sorts of things have always been in the Republican Party. And so what the net effect has been, and I've looked at these numbers and keep track of these numbers since I started in 1990, is that it's real. When people cross over, ultimately they don't cross back. And so whether good, bad, or indifferent, that's what happens. When people can't vote for their local sheriff's office, when you have candidates that are running for that or for some other local position, because people like to vote locally, then what happens is that they'll cross over to do that. And I know from talking to people in those 9 elections that people just tell me, you know, we're not going to vote in this, Joe. We need to, I want to vote for somebody else in the election. And I know those folks have never crossed back. When I first started in 1990, there was about, I think it was a little under 600 Democrats in the county at that time. Right now, I think when I checked with the clerk as of today, there's 120. So my point is this, is like somebody else said, be careful what you wish for because you might get it. And the effect that has already occurred and will continue to occur is that, one, people will cross over, and they're going to become a part of the Republican Party. They're going to be a part, we'll have a one-party state, and that's a fact because it's already occurred. The second thing that, and I don't recall the lady's name with the statistics, but it was kind of interesting, and it's something else that I've observed as well, is that people choose also not to vote. And that seems to be a bigger issue in some instances than otherwise. So my point is that I just wanted to let you guys know what the experience was with that. I think you're going to create, by passage of this, eventually a one-party state in all but maybe 2 counties, and for at least for right now. And that is, I stand for any questions. Thank you for allowing me to address this by video.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Are there any questions for Mr. Barron? You said there's only 120 Democrats left up there in Crook County.
Yes, sir.
That makes it sound like if 61 Republicans decided to cross over, you'd be in trouble. Because this thing can cut both ways, and it would really, it goes to the whole point of what we're trying to do here. Would that, I mean, you could have a pro-life, pro-gun, pro-low tax, quote, Democrat who does not support any part of the Democrat platform. And if 61 people crossed over in your county, that person would be the Democrat nominee in the into the general election. Do you think that's okay?
You know something, if somebody wants to run for the office, they can do it. And so that's part of our election process. You know, the first thing they got to do, well, actually, they don't have to do it, but Mr. Chairman, is they need to put their name on the ballot, and then they've got to get enough of their friends and family to vote for them. And it would actually be less than that given the primary. I think I got 37 votes in the last primary of the 47 Democrats that voted in Crook County. So it would only take 38.
Okay. Senator McEwen has a question for you, Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aren't the elections for your locally elected officials, city council, those type that you brought up, aren't those bipartisan? They're not by party, are they? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Barron.
Mr. Chairman, Senator McCowan, the municipal elections are nonpartisan, meaning that you don't declare a political party. County elected officials, such as the county sheriff, the county commissioners, those sorts, are partisan political offices, such as mine, county attorney. That's a partisan political office, just like the state offices are on that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your testimony, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to appear by video. I appreciate it. It saves a trip.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Judy, who's next? Laura Pearson, please turn on your camera and your microphone and introduce yourself to the Revenue Committee, please.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Laura Tolliver Pearson. I'm a 6th-generation sheep rancher in Southwest Wyoming and a school bus driver. I just wanted to, I think all of the points have pretty much been hit. But I do want you to know that I personally know 3 people that laughingly looked at me and said I was a Republican for a day. And I'm pretty new getting into politics. And I mean, I've always voted, but I always asked my dad who to vote for. And I can tell you that a lot of those 60,000 voters that aren't voting, probably 30 of them that are in my transportation department, flat out told me that they don't believe that their vote matters. So that's a problem. I believe that crossover voting is a problem in our state. And I also believe that it's going to get worse. And then I believe also that it affects the down ballots. If you have everyone crossing over for one candidate, Think of what it's doing to all of those people that worked so hard campaigning that possibly didn't win their elections because of the crossover. Thank you for allowing me to take your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pearson. Any questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
for this today. Judy, is that it for Zoom? Okay. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
I'll move the bill.
Moved by McEwen, second by Ide. Any discussion on the bill? Any amendments? Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I just, I want to explain my position. I'm going to be a no vote on this bill. Probably, you guys know that. And it's not because I have any issues with the Republican Party electing its own folks. I've been a Republican ever since I joined when I was in college. I've never been anything else. But what I really think, this bill will take care of crossover voting. But I think what's going to happen, because of the timing of it, everyone is going to cross over and they're going to stay there. And I know some people don't believe that's going to happen. But frankly, when I ran this last term, I had 2 Republicans run against me, and then I had a Democratic opponent as well. And so during the primary, when I went door to door, I just singled out Republican homes, based on the data. But lo and behold, you don't know how many folks told me, well, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I said, well, it says you're registered as one. I said, well, yeah, because I don't have a choice if I'm not. So yes, this will drive more and more people to become Republicans and not come back to the Democratic Party, which, if that's what the Republican Party wants, a bunch of Democrats in their party, this is what it's going to do. I just don't understand the fear that's behind this. I don't fear it, but apparently a lot of people fear it. But I don't understand that kind of fear in a state that we're overwhelmingly Republican. But I just know those that didn't cross back. We heard some testimony to the point that they haven't. There will be more and more now because of this. What are our expectations of this bill? My expectations are exactly that. I don't think they're unrealistic. I believe that we are going to, as one person put it, we will be bringing this to a one party state. But everybody's going to be in that party, Democrats and Republicans. And I don't know if that's a very, healthy situation. I do know it also does limit choice. I have no problem with choice. I don't fear that. It does create, as I believe the clerk said, it will be an obstacle to some people voting because they won't know what'll happen. They won't make that decision by May, and they're not going to be able to vote come general election. But I just think that I do represent everybody in my district. Okay, and my district is probably more liberal than almost everybody's district here in the center of Cheyenne. So I, except maybe Teton County and Laramie, so I have a lot of voters who don't see things like I see them. But I do still represent them, and I do represent that 10 or 12% that are unaffiliated who I don't know what's going to happen to them. So anyhow, just wanted to say my 2 cents worth. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman. I
Burgess.
appreciate it.
We appreciate your remarks, sir. Any further comment? Question being called. Judy, will you please take the roll?
Aye. Aye.
No.
Aye. Okay, Senate, or House Bill 103 is passed Senate revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, we only have 15 minutes left, so we will have to lay back House Bill 98 to next Tuesday. Committee, thank you very much. Audience, appreciate your civility, and this meeting is adjourned.